Hello, everybody, and welcome to our 13th monthly meeting. This means we are doing it for more than a year, and I see that on average for each topic, we have at least 200 views. Means we probably should continue, as looks like people watching that. So this time, we'll speak about differences between types of icons. Icons we used for daily prayer, and yet they have certain diversities, and especially those which we call like fest icons or festal or festival icons versus the portrait icons. Let's call them this way because it's mainly about the type of representation where we see a saint mainly as we could compare it with a portrait of someone we know. So, and we begin talking about icons and how we relate to them. But before this, I want to take a couple of steps back and to see a bigger picture. Not only icons as separate portable pieces one can paint, but also details of a bigger environment. Because icons didn't appear by themselves from zero, they were always part of a huge Christian visual culture, which began shaping long ago. Now we are preparing a new course on history and theology of iconography, and I will show you one of the images from the very, very beginning of Christian history, like this one. It's Dura Europos, and actually it's a synagogue, but yet it's the beginning of Christian history, and it's Samuel anointing David for kingship. So what do we see here? We see several figures standing, but mainly when we try to describe what we see a certain action, because mainly the Bible is about the actions which invites us to feel compassion. And if you look at catacomb frescoes, we also will see an invitation for compassion. The resurrection of Lazarus here is visualized in front of our eyes as a testimony. For ancient people, it was like a document. Seeing something on the wall at the time was like for us seeing something on the news. We believe what we see. Also, these people believed what they saw. And that's actually where our festival icons come from. The action from the Old Testament and the New Testament. And artists wanted us to eyewitness these events, to visually partake in them and to be engaged. That's what an artist meant, producing this or that image, providing us with the details like the oak and other trees, everything he or she painted here. This mosaic demonstrates a living piece of history. And to make the viewer feel participant of this piece of history, there are two ways to solve this problem. First, used by Western artists, is to try to make images look more realistic. Like here, it's like a documentary about St. George. We see a lot of real details, and we see how exactly George was like trying to, kill the dragon. And something to speak about later, I'm sure you will like it. I also learned it really lately. It probably could be a good question for everybody, and for you, Kelly. How do you think we describe this situation? Because why the queen or the princess, is leading the dragon on a leash with a collar? What do you think about it? So why is it necessary to demonstrate her somehow leading him on a leash or it on a leash?
Well, let me just say this. Philip. This is the first time I've ever seen an image like this with a princess taking a dragon on the leash. Usually you see them up in a castle, up in the corner. You'll see a lot of buildings in a castle, and she's somewhat the princess is in the castle. I've never seen, or sometimes the princess is not at all in the icon at all. I mean, it's just St. George and the dragon, that's it. But this looks very medieval. Well, it was 300 AD, I believe. St. George was during that time frame. So, but it just, his outfit. Well, he's got the red cape, which is typical. He's got why she's doing that. The question is why. I have no idea. I would be very frightened of a dragon. I don't think I would put it on a leash in real times. Maybe it's like saying they're conquering the dragon, conquering Satan. He's got the sword in the mouth of the dragon, and she's got him on a leash. In other words, it's like, okay, I'm going to drag him away. There, he's not going to bother us again. We're done with him. So
you are yes, you are very, very close. Because technically, well, first I have to say that you probably didn't notice that. It really is very often that the princess is depicted just next to the dragon, and I have to stop his sound, and holding him on the leash, because it really is very often. Probably the majority of images of George, dragon, and princess I saw would have them, well, in different, I don't know, sizes, colors, proportions, but yet she always would hold him on a leash. And you started guessing, and you were totally right, because the dragon is the evil, of course, it symbolizes the evil, but talking about human civilization and earthly life, we cannot totally eliminate evil. We cannot just kill it. So we can subordinate it. We can make it obey. We take control over our passions, our vicious desires. And here the artist demonstrates how the princess takes the control of the evil. So that's it. That's actually the whole story. The evil was trying to get control over humans, but here at the end, the control was taken by the humans. And going back to the lecture, we spoke about inviting the viewer to feel compassion with the image. So the Western way to make image look realistic is this one, and the Eastern one. And their idea was to add at least one person in the image. In this case, it's a festival icon, to add someone who would always be looking towards the viewer. At least one person, sometimes many, but at least one. Inviting for a dialogue. And it worked when artists had this in mind, inviting the viewer to a possibility to participate, to visual dialogue with him. Maybe we see this in earlier icons, because on later icons, we may see a different approach. The biblical events, the scenes from New Testament and later icons, are considered rather epic stories of the past. And we see that in here, artists just puts more energy on representing the details of the event than making us feel witnesses. So this artist wants to decorate everything, makes you curious about this decoration. We just are invited to look at details and wonder how did he or she paint this or that. So much going on. Must be something interesting in there. And that's how our eyes get stuck. So we are invited to participate visually just by the number of details added by the artist. So that's his way of, or her way of intriguing us. Or another expression like here, the idea is to delight the viewer, to visually punch the viewer, I would say, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe for this period of time, the artist just wanted to give a fresh impression of this event, and that is why needed to invent something so extravagant. However, my personal impression is that the viewer in this image is not included. It's a feeling that they already are happy there in the world, and they do not invite us for participation. They just exist by themselves. Maybe I'm wrong, I'd be happy to be, but I just want to return to the Eastern Church practices and tradition of making the church to become a little model of paradise. And everything around the church, of course, was supposed to be kind of preparation for you to enter the paradise. And I guess especially in Georgia here, it was important to let people walk always upwards to come to the church, because most of their temples, cathedrals, are high and built very high on the mountains. In Russia, people try to choose special placements for churches, but they wouldn't have landscapes like this. So Georgians had this advantage and they used it. Bringing you to paradise means already on the earth, bringing you to a place where you feel, I don't know, admiring, admirable environment and landscapes. In Russia, it would be different because they try to incorporate churches into the, I don't know, woods, into the cityscape, so that you would feel harmony of the whole space. And they were trying to make them special, and some of them would even become the symbol of the country, so beautifully they are positioned in the environment around them. And some of them, well, especially in periods after the 12th century, were having what people used to call iconostasis, because we know that originally in Saint Sophia in Constantinople and in many Greek churches, people would have the columns, a temple on top, but the space between the columns in earlier church would never be covered. They could be having some curtains, veils, but not icons. In Russian churches, people started adding icons between the columns and building up an entire wall of icons. Yet, not earlier than in the end of the 15th century. And it began really growing in Russia, and it got, I don't know, almost up to the ceiling. We can speak about iconostasis in different meetings. It's a huge topic. I just want to say there were different iconostasises in different periods, but mainly what they were about. It was a complex structure which included all sorts of icons, composing an ensemble together. Well, after the revolution, the religion was officially banned in Russia, and most churches were destroyed or abandoned and got destroyed naturally, just by the time, wind, and water. But yet, we sometimes can see the structure of iconostasis. Most of them were burned, and only few survived. So the majority of village churches would look like this. However, we can still reconstruct the general impression of an iconostasis and discuss what it was like. After 15th century, as I mentioned, a typical iconostasis would include lots of different types of icons. There would be portrait icons of Christ and Mother of God, of several saints, festal icons, which we see a little on top, and the ones which could probably include sometimes lives of the saints, like here, life of Saint Nicholas around his, I don't know, figure. And sometimes we would approach the iconostasis as a place where saints are gathered. It's the way we slowly come to the moment when I'd like to speak about the type, which I haven't announced in the beginning, which is deicist type. We see here in the middle, and this deicist type of icons includes icons of saints standing before Christ in prayer. In Russian churches, we will always find this line right on top of the royal gates. It's one of the most important parts of the iconostasis. And at least 3 icons can be there: Christ in the middle, Theotokos on the left, and John the Baptist on the right. And other figures also always facing towards Christ, with their hands raised in supplication on behalf of humanity, praying for the world. But I think this type was also introduced to help to enhance the power of personal dialogue with God. When you see others focusing in prayer together with you, just like you feel in the middle of a praying crowd, in the company of saints, supporting you. And you just have a specific, mood, impression that you are not alone. You are praying together with the saints. In other words, these icons visualize what actually is happening, the hierarchy of saints, which is concluded by us. Even if we are visible, while they are invisible, we all pray together. We are part of their society, even though we are still here. Every time iconostasis icons have their purpose. I don't want to go deep into this, but I just want to make a special addition. Not only the deicist icons could have several lines in them, but I just wanted to say that rarely you encounter such a specific type of iconography in the books. 2 years ago, we have traveled in north of Russia, where people used to make churches of wood. Little and large, this one is quite little, but even in tiny churches, they used to make or to paint so-called heavens. They create icons attached to the ceiling in shape of the octagonal kind of iconostasis on the ceiling. Look at that. In the middle, they could very often put the image of God Sabaoth or Christ, and officially it's forbidden to put the image of God Sabaoth like here, but yet somehow they did it, maybe after the Western models were brought in Russia by many masters. Anyhow, this kind of imagery on the ceiling is very special characteristic for the northern Russia. And it's just amazing how they have them everywhere. In all, even most little churches, they have this very specific type. Nowhere else I've seen it. And another exception, I could say, just again to enrich your vision a little bit, that one single icon can contain lots of different images on itself. Oh, this is called Sabaoth. Like here, this used to be a door of an iconostasis, and let's try to analyze how the iconographer made it. In the bottom, we see Daniel and the lions around him. So this would be the first floor of one icon. Then on top, we would see the model of paradise, the bosom of Abraham, another icon on one board. And on the very top, we see the creation of Adam and Eve and their further adventures. I think it's particularly great when these services are long and you do not always understand what's being said, especially in Church Slavonic language. But then your eyes can start wandering around and get immersed into the visual version of paradise, like here. You start looking at different figures and see more and more details all the time. And this is actually how icons are painted in layers, and why they're painted in layers and with so many details. The visual hierarchy allows to establish several levels of perception, and on each of them, we are enriched with specific new message. First thing first, and maybe at the end, your eye will arrive to look at the lions and to analyze their tongues and their face expressions and everything else. How, I don't know, funny or wild they are. Many different things in this huge complex, which is called iconographers. And now at the end, I'll say some words about the portable icons, which were called as portrait icons. The earliest one, as you know, belongs to the 4th century. And if we compare the portable icons with frescoes, decorative objects, or book illustrations, they will reveal the strongest ability to provide us with visual contact and to serve as focusing points, because they are made for people to visually communicate with other people who have already been recognized as saints. So let's repeat from the beginning. The icons with the events call for our active compassion towards the event, which may happen in the past, but yet we are expected or suggested to experience what is happening just in front of us now and forever. Portable portrait icons engage with us because of the fact that the faces are made like portraits. Portraits we use to communicate with. And there is an interesting observation by one of the scholars, I guess it was 20th century, and that's how it sounds. It's not only me or us looking at the icon, but it's also icon looking at us or at me. So it's not just me thinking and making decisions in this world, but it is the icon, and in her presence, I find myself in a very specific position. It's the icon who invites me to communicate, not me insisting on communication. It's a very interesting, thoughtful theory. And again, we are talking about engaging in some visual interaction, not in action, which would be appropriate for the festal icons, but in visual dialogue. We look at her, she somehow feels our presence. Our presence is calculated by the artist who created it and is made suggesting a visual dialogue. This dialogue is not based on psychology, feelings, or emotions. It's like a dialogue with a friend or colleague who is already praying for you to Christ. This is it. And special thanks to Veronica Royal for the great topic. This is it. Thank you for listening.